Ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, allow us to start, please. So, distinguished delegates, dear members of Parliament, European and national ones, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, I'm extremely happy to welcome you today to the side events co-organized by the European Parliament and the Permanent Mission of Greece to the United Nations. I would like to highlight that this is actually the very first side event co-organized by the European Parliament here at the United Nations. So I think it's a very important moment, and for Greece, being an old member of the European Union, particularly happy and honored for this. We are honored to have with us a number of panelists who are experts in their respective field and whose combined work and dedication has led to significant progress in the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. I believe it's quite evident that inclusivity is an integral part of modern democracies. The term democracy as such includes the notion of people, demos in Greek, and the participation of citizens in the process of governance is accomplished through the elected representatives in parliaments. The Greek Parliament ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and its additional protocols in 2012 and have since elaborated legislation related to its implementation. It has also on many occasions recognized the dedication of athletes participating in Paralympic Games and has held meetings with representatives of Greek Association of Persons with Disabilities. Moreover, in one of its reports in 2020, the Subcommittee on Issues Relating to Persons with Disabilities elaborated on matters pertaining to equal access and equal opportunities in society, economy and culture, and in overall aspects of everyday life. The adoption of the first National Action Plan for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which covers the period 2021-2027, has been another milestone in domestic policy. Seminal actions include the institution of the National Accessibility Authority as an independent body that advises the Prime Minister on issues of access and accessibility. Today, we are extremely honored and happy to have with us the President of the National Accessibility Authority, Professor Konstantinos Stefanidis, among others, as a panelist. With these introductory remarks, I'm again welcoming you to this side event. I am sure that we all look forward to learning more from our distinguished panelists. So without further ado, I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Dragos Pislaru, Member of the European Parliament, Chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. This is indeed a premiere. This is the first time the European Parliament has the opportunity of organizing a side event within the UN, and I would really love to thank everyone that has made this event possible. My name is Dragos Pislaru. I'm a member of the European Parliament, leading this delegation of 3 committees from the European Parliament with 7 members. I would like to just mention my colleagues because we are truly one team here, regardless of the political family that we are coming from. We have here Ms. Abir Al-Sahlani, we have Katrin Langensieben, we have Janina Hochka, Maria Grappini, Rosa Estera Sferagut, and Cristina Maestre Martin de Almagro, representing the political groups and 3 committees, the Employment and the Social Affairs, the LIBE Committee, and the Petition Committee in the European Parliament. I'm really glad that we had such a strong delegation here because there is a firm commitment that we share in the European Parliament representing the will of the European citizens to pursue with the implementation of the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disability. And I'm also very glad to be here near Markus Schäfer, member of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and CRPD Committee rapporteur for the next report on the EU. It's important for us to have our house first in order in the EU and to provide an example and, of course, guidance on how we can move things forward. And thank you very much, dear Marcus, for accepting to moderate our event with this high level of expertise in the matter. We also are delighted to have Pat Clark here with us from the European Disability Forum. He's the Vice President representing IDA, International Disability Alliance. Nothing for you without you. This is our guiding principle, and we are so grateful for this contribution. We do cooperate very closely on several matters related to children's rights, to fighting against child poverty. We have a working group in the European Parliament on the child guarantee, where we are discussing the important issues where it comes to children with disabilities. Our speaker, Konstantin Stefanidis, President of the National Accessibility Authority of Greece, will actually give us an insight on the situation in Greece, and this is really remarkable, and thank you so much for that. We also have Rati Yonatamshvili, distinguished member of the parliament in Georgia, and Francisco Unduraga, member of the Chilean parliament, with us, who can give us an insight on the structure in the houses. And I would like to mention again my dear colleague Katrin Langensieben. She is not only a member of the European Parliament and the vice chair of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee, but also the chair of the European Parliament CRPD Network and Disability Rights Coordinator in the European Parliament. And I will explain briefly what that means later. I would like also to acknowledge something very important if we are talking about the parliamentary dimension. I have this amazing pleasure to recognize the presence in the room of Deputy Sean Coney, member of the Irish Joint Committee on Disability Matters. So thank you very much for your presence here. He is tasked with monitoring the implementation of the UNCRPD, and also have another parliamentarian from Ireland, the Deputy Michael Moynihan, chair of the committee, also attending this particular session, COSP16. So you see, from all over the world, we have this parliamentary involvement, and I think that really deserves to be pushed further and become continuous participation in these kind of matters. Just a few words about what we are doing in the European Parliament. European Parliament is a co-legislator at European level, and we have actually pushed first in the beginning of this legislature for the strategy at the EU level, and then with the support, and I want here to acknowledge the presence of the European Commission. We are a big team Europe, and we have with us Director Katarina Ivankovic-Knežević in the room, and also Alison Grab, the head of unit. So we have actually adopted in 2021 the strategy for persons with disabilities, and this has actually allowed us to push forward several initiatives, and we are waiting right now a very topical one, the European Disability Card, that in September would become a landmark in terms of providing mobility and having the rights of persons with disability at the forefront. And this is something that it's very long waited in Europe. Just to mention 2 words about the CRPD network in the European Parliament. Since 2015, we adopted this structure. We have in this working group 13 parliamentary committees out of the 20 in European Parliament to ensure the mainstreaming, and it's very important to understand that I mentioned already 3 committees: Employment and Social Affairs, Civil Liberty and Petitions, but also we have Internal Market and Consumer Protection. We have also the Committee on Regional Affairs and many others to ensure the mainstreaming of the issues related to persons with disability. One important thing, and I'm coming to the closing of my intervention, is that indeed we are walking the talk. The UNCRPD committee recommends in this 2015 report that all EU institutions have focal points. We have thus implemented this CRPD network, and we have revamped it right now recently, having a disability rights coordinator, mainstreaming the activity, having reports and monitoring the legislation. And my dear colleague Katrin Langensieben will further expand on that. I just want to end by saying that this is just one particular step in the direction to ensure a more important parliamentary direction. We've been discussing here about the need for social behavior change, social pressure, and we need champions. We need persons that will represent persons with people with disability in the legislative work. And we talk about reforms and investment, transformative initiatives, to quote the Undersecretary General Li Junhong that we've just met, that require legislation. So for that, beyond the intergovernmental dimension, beyond working with you, the social civil society, we need the parliamentary dimension. With that, again, I would like to thank you very, very much for your involvement and participation in the event. And so without further ado, I will pass it to you, dear Marcus, Mr. Schäfer, and thanks all of you for participating in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragos, for creating the atmosphere for us to the issues, the speakers. And for me, as a member of the CRPD, it's a great chance to be here and to moderate this side event. It is somewhat ironic. We never lose our national identities, even though we are in international organizations. And it gives me hope that a Swiss citizen can moderate a side event by the European Union. Maybe, after all, Switzerland might remain part of Europe and not fall totally outside. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to hear about and talk about disability-inclusive democracy. And when we talk about this, this is an issue that goes to the core of what we are and who we are, how we are organized, to the core of how our states and how even the EU exercises its powers and gets its legitimacy. Persons with disabilities, of course, need to be just as much a part of democracy like everybody else. Now, the UNCRP, the convention, it contains several provisions that speak directly to democracy. Look at Article 4, Section 3, which guarantees to persons with disabilities and their representative organizations to be actively consulted in all matters relating to them. Look at Article 33.2, where participation in monitoring mechanisms is required, and look particularly at Article 29, a core provision that guarantees to persons with disability equal participation in political and public life. These are fundamental provisions. Everything else that comes out of the democratic processes needs to have the legitimacy that goes back to persons with disabilities, just like it goes back to everybody else. So, my role as a moderator is formal. I can't refrain sometimes from saying something substantive. I would now go on and have my first speaker, Pat Clark. Pat Clark from EDF, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you on behalf of the International Disability Alliance and the European Disability Forum. I would like to start by thanking Greece and the European Parliament for organising this event, and I'm very pleased to be here alongside such distinguished panellists. This is a very timely discussion for us in Europe, as we are just under 1 year away from the 2024 European elections, and it is just before or right after these elections when the possibilities arise to rethink and revamp the structures in our political institutions. I would like to focus my intervention on 3 key elements to make these institutions inclusive of persons with disabilities, and these are: 1, policies to uphold political participation of persons with disabilities. Second one is accessibility. And the third, the mechanisms to comply and mainstream the CRPD and ensure meaningful involvement of persons with disabilities and their representative organisations. First and foremost, states parties must live up to their obligations under Article 29 of the Convention by removing the legal barriers and preventing persons with disabilities from participating on an equal basis to the political and public life of the country. Last year, EDF launched an in-depth report benchmarking progress in all countries of the EU as for political rights of persons with disabilities in the EU elections. We have brought some copies of this report with me, but unfortunately I'm down to 3 at this point in time. There's been such a demand on it. But they're here if anybody wants to come and talk to me afterwards. In a nutshell, we found that only 13 countries uphold the right to vote to all persons with disabilities without exception. And only 8 countries ensure the right to stand as a candidate. The rest of the countries, 14 in total, deprive by law persons with disabilities under total or partial guardianship from exercising their political rights in elections as citizens of their nation. Furthermore, millions of persons with disabilities simply do not participate in elections because of the lack of accessibility or reasonable accommodation to vote independently. and in secret, or a general apathy on the part of the citizens because of the foregoing. The challenges in this regard range from casting a vote to receiving accessible information from the election authority, the free choice of assistants to vote. It goes without saying that removing these legal and practical barriers is a precondition to have more persons with disabilities turning out in elections and more elected policymakers with disabilities. And this brings me to my second point, accessibility. States parties should set up internal policies to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal access to discussions, materials concerning political life and public affairs, websites, meetings, documents and resources used by governments and parliaments should comply with state-of-the-art accessibility requirements. And additionally, they should strive to provide this information in an accessible manner to all persons with disabilities in their preferred form of communication. This includes easy to understand and read information, sign language interpretation and Braille, for example. Particular attention should also be given to the mechanisms put forward by our political institutions to involve citizens, such as the possibility of launching citizens' initiatives, lodging a complaint or petition, participating in a hearing, or responding to a public consultation prior to the development of a law. Lastly, third point we would like to raise is the setting up of internal mechanisms to comply with the CRPD. These should be a twofold approach. First, the internal policies, resources and leadership to respect the CRPD as a public administration. These should cover not only my previous points about the accessibility to political institutions, but also the inclusion of persons with disabilities, including elected officials with disabilities. The second element of this internal mechanism is to set up a focal point to mainstream the CRPD in the policy-making role of the Parliament. In the EU, there are 3 countries with a dedicated disability committee: Greece, Spain and Ireland. And I am delighted to say that the Chair and a member of Ireland's Oireachtas Joint Disability Matters Committee are present at the COSP, with one of them in the room at present. Such a CRPD focal point should be instrumental in overseeing all the policy-making procedures and intervene to ensure that all policies in the making are compliant with the Convention. Therefore, and given the cross-cutting nature of the CRPD, we need this focal point to be really influential and have the resources to bring change to draft legislations. Besides, it is equally important that such a focal point in the Parliament is in sync with other focal points in the institutions, in other institutions of the state, to ensure institutional coordination when it comes to the implementation of the CRPD. Parliament as a whole, and particularly those new structures, should do their utmost to increase the representations of persons with disabilities in-house and to meaningfully involve persons with disabilities and their representative organisations in all matters, relative policy matters affecting persons with disabilities. And finally, a small piece of breaking news. The Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights of the OSCE will soon launch an e-learning course entitled Promoting the Participation of Persons with Disabilities. It's an interactive tool for parliaments and political parties. I serve on its advisory panel at this point. Its goal is to present practical tips and good practices for making parliaments, political parties in the OSCE region more disability inclusive. The target audience, of course, the course that takes approximately 2 hours to complete, is staff and members of parliaments and political parties across the region. It will be available to the public on the OSCE Learning platform. Very shortly indeed, ODIHR will be partnering with the Office of Human Resources in the Irish Parliament to offer the course to the MPs and parliamentary staff in Ireland. So I thank you for your attention this afternoon.
Thank you, Pat, for showing us the wide range of measures that need to be taken in order to render democratic processes, including parliaments, inclusive. You mentioned the elections next year. I assume not everything will be completed by that time. You've set a time frame that's probably also covers the elections after that. That being said, we go to our next speaker. I would ask Konstantinos Stefanidis for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. It is an honor for me to be here today. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, yesterday, as one of the participants of the CRPD Roundtable 2 on digital accessibility for persons with disabilities, my contribution highlighted a number of significant challenges which I propose to briefly share with you today, believing that it is important to do so. Access to technology nowadays encompasses not only information, but also goods and services in crucial sectors, such as healthcare, education, employment, and justice, all amounting to access to fundamental human rights. Today, in the context of this highly important side event, co-organized by the Permanent Mission of Greece to UN and the European Parliament, it is crucially important to add to the above list the issue of full access to democratic rights. In this respect, allow me to briefly mention a recent example from my country, now in the middle of an election period. In the beginning of this year, the competent Ministry of the Interior has sought to update the relevant electoral procedures by seeking the advice and adopting the recommendations of the National Accessibility Authority ahead of the customary public consultation phase, before passing through Parliament legislation that has significantly improved practical accessibility aspects for people with disabilities. While most countries around the world have already responded to the need for digital accessibility by enacting legislation that mandates the accessibility of web services and mobile applications, it appears that, regrettably, we are still far off the target, as evidenced by all national and international studies conducted until now. And this is despite the fact that web accessibility is a well-mapped area, featuring a wealth of principles, guidelines, and best practice about how to achieve this goal, as provided, for instance, by the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Acknowledging the existence of a gap between enacted policies and practice, yesterday I cited Aristotle, who claimed that there is no difference between not having laws and not enforcing laws, and I called upon collective wisdom to ensure that digital accessibility is achieved in practice instead of being simply the letter of the law. I could stop here. Alas, the gap between policies and practice is likely to further increase instead of decrease as we move from the by now well-defined web accessibility issues to the yet uncharted territory of digital accessibility of the emerging new tech interactive systems of extended reality and the intelligent environments. This is not only due to the additional complexity introduced by the technological demands for monitoring, reasoning, decision-making, and adaptation. The new key accessibility challenges will concern the user's interaction, the potentially high cognitive demands imposed, but also the fact that accessibility needs should be ensured simultaneously at multiple levels. First, accessibility of the digital devices by their owners, as well by other potential users with different requirements. Second, accessibility of the environment as a whole, specifically devices, content, and functions provided. And third, the combined accessibility of the virtual and physical worlds. Moreover, advancing the agenda to artificial intelligence-enabled systems, the additional concerns are raised regarding algorithmic bias against individuals or entire social groups, including persons with disabilities, older adults, and vulnerable individuals. In conclusion, The argument put forward here is for digital systems and technological environments to be designed following proactive, human-centered approaches, putting humans in the loop and in control of the entire system life cycle, helping the emerging digital world become more human-centric and thus more inclusive. Therefore, new appropriate legislation is urgently required as an indispensable tool to address these issues. Once again, the European Parliament has a splendid opportunity to be a pioneer in addressing these challenges that arise from the interplay of technological progress and the real societal needs, in particular the needs of people with disabilities. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanidis, for focusing on the fact that democracy increasingly involves the digital environment, be it voting systems, accessible voting systems, and other issues, and remarking on the gap between legislation and its implementation, something we on the committee frequently encounter, not simply in this area, but all over the place. Many countries have fabulous legislation and hardly any implementation. That's one of the defining factors that we often find in states parties. We will now go on with our next presentation by Rati Yonatamishvili. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this panel and for the opportunity to share my parliamentary experience as a disabled MP. In my speech, I will talk about the practice and challenges we have both in terms of lawmaking and the implementation of parliamentary oversight. I have been a member of the Parliament of Georgia for 7 years, and before being elected to the Parliament, I had a 10-year background as a human rights civil activist. I had no interest in changing my profile, but when the Georgian Dream Party offered me to participate in the elections, I agreed only after we, the disabled community, received guarantees that the priorities we had in terms of disability policy would be reflected in the election program of the political party. This is the first stage of involvement that political parties should include disabled people during election programs and print these programs in all accessible formats. During the election to the parliament, the first barrier was the non-adapted building of the Parliament of Georgia, and second barrier was the stereotypical attitude of my colleagues, and I was a direct role model for their awareness-raising campaign. Also, my country had ratified the CRPD, but we had no legislative harmonization, no optional protocol, no universal design accessibility standards, and no committee as an interagency national coordination mechanism for the implementation of the CRPD. There was also no experience of parliamentary oversight of disability policy in the country. I can proudly say that all the above-mentioned issues have been positively resolved. So we had a double responsibility. One, to make decisions together with disabled community, and to create the best precedents. Another stereotype that I broke was the following. In my country, people with disabilities only spoke about the rights of people with disabilities. I actively participated in various political debates and processes which indirectly helped to raise awareness. It is very important that we, as disability decision makers, do not focus solely on disability policy, and that our work processes should be as diverse as our needs. The main basis for the construction and development of a disability-inclusive democracy is the approval of a disability-inclusive budget. We approve the state budget every year in December, but we have the first draft version in September, which we share these DPOs and PWDs. After their feedback, we start lobbying until the final process. As a result of this cooperation, we introduced new programs, including the institutionalization, indexation of the social package, financing of the Paralympic movement, and many more. My last issue concerns the implementation of parliamentary oversight. We must understand that parliamentary oversight is the responsibility of members of parliament, and we are obliged to implement this process together with disabled people. In the Parliament of Georgia, we use various tools for this. They are thematic inquiries, PLS, report of the public defender, and committee hearings, where the executive authority reports to us on the implementation of action plans. It is a platform attended by persons with disabilities, and they can ask questions to the ministers face-to-face and receive answers. When we started this practice, the first situation was not ideal. But from meeting to meeting, the ministers came more prepared, and their action plans were more and more relevant to the needs and real interest of PWDs. Also in these meetings, DPOs ask us questions and share their comments, which are then transformed into an action plan. It is critical that the oversight process be transparent, inclusive, and principled. The more effectively disabled people control you, the more effectively you control the government.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yonatavishvili, for your presentation. You referred to the need of political parties to include persons with disabilities, because if they don't even get in the electoral process. And you mentioned one of the regular obstacles we always face, stereotypes. Stereotypes that people might not even be aware of, that they have them. That's something to fight. Budgets, something on the committee we regularly recommend member states to allocate budgets to the measures that they propose. And oversight. I was honored to be rapporteur for Georgia in the last state party reporting procedure. I'm very honored to have been invited end of September to visit your country, and so I feel at home here with your presentation. Thank you. We now go to our next speaker, Kathrin Langensieben from the European Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Schäfer, Excellency. Again, thank you very much to Greece for co-hosting this important side event with the European Parliament, and that I have the honor to talk and discuss here in front of distinguished participants to this conference from around the world. It is nothing about us without us for persons with disabilities, but this should not remain an empty phrase. For me, COSP is supposed to be the international platform to exchange best practices. We should not only talk, but search for solutions. And this is the responsibility that we as elected parliamentarians have. But as you can see, it is also for me as a woman with a visible disability something personally extremely important. Dear participants, distinguished other panelists, the election in 2019 brought me to the European Parliament. I am one out of 5 members with a visual disability from a total of 705. And you might all agree that we are by far underrepresented. Today I'm here to talk about building up a disability-inclusive democracy. Innovative parliamentary policies and structures to advance rights for persons with disabilities, or to put it differently, what can we do and what are we doing to ensure democratic participation for everyone within the European institutions and within the European Union? But I'm not only here as an MEP, but also as a disability rights coordinator, and this is also about structures. To explain a little, as the EU is also a signatory to the convention, all EU institutions have to implement the UN CRPD, and this applies also to the European Parliament, and on the one hand as co-legislator, on the other hand as administration. So we have to make our buildings meeting rooms, websites accessible. We have to create an accessible and inclusive work environment for members with disabilities like me and also our staff with disabilities and staff carers of disabled persons. We have a specific budget line to support our staff and their children, and we receive very positive reports to this support is granted rapidly and in a non-bureaucratic manner. European schools need to become inclusive, and there are initiatives, but still children, especially with intellectual disabilities, are fully or partially excluded. Lots to be done still there. We are talking about increasing employment for persons with disabilities in the European institutions. The European Parliament has positive action schemes in place for accepting trainees and employing contract staff with disabilities. Yet, our general competition are not completely accessible, and we fail to have a quota for candidates with disabilities become employees in our public administration. But let me now come to how the EP implements UN CRPD on political level. In 2015, the European Parliament CRPD network has been set up as an intercommittee working group led by the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. Members of 12 other committees out of the 20 standing committees in the House are participating in this network. Amongst them, my colleagues from the Civil Liberties and Petition Committees that have joined us in our delegation here present. So why do we need this cross-cutting approach? As you all know, the rights assured under the Convention touch upon all imaginable policies. We have heard that during this conference and bilateral meetings. And we also need funding in line with the Convention, meaning no more support for institutions, and a budget in the EU that allows us to realize all our policies. Therefore, the Committee on Regional Development in charge for the funds is part of the network, and also the Budget Committee. And the Internal Market Committee, competent for the European Accessibility Act, the Web Accessibility Directive, and the Accessible EU Centre, one of the flagship initiatives of the European Disability Strategy 21 to 2030. My colleagues from the Civil Liberties Committees pushing since long time for the European Horizontal Anti-Discrimination Directive. The Transport Committee for assuring the respect of disabled passenger rights, and the Petition Committee receives a lot of complaints from all over the EU. I could go on and on. That is why we need the CRP network who brings us all together. Since 2019, I'm sharing the CRPD network, but sadly during COVID, we could not meet, but we restarted early this year and met twice already. Why did we propose to revamp the CRPD committee and the Disability Rights Coordinator? During our last year's delegation to COSP, the European Parliament was called up to strengthen its commitments towards fulfilling its implementation and monitoring obligations under the Convention, at both the political and administrative levels. We all know the EU is under review by the UN CRPD committee who is preparing its next report, so we need to act. But to date, mainstreaming disability rights has not become an automatism within the EU institutions. Therefore, in my role as Disability Rights Coordinator, I am aiming at pushing the better monitoring of the implementation of the UN CRPD. And this through a report every 2.5 years, midterm and end of the mandate. But not only that, we need to ensure mainstreaming of the Parliament's legislative and non-legislative work in the field of disability rights and proposing input on specific files. However, I intend not doing this also alone, but as I highlighted it earlier, in close cooperation with all members of the 13 committees represented in the CRPD network. With the RERAMP network, we ensure that information and political demands for persons with disabilities are not only dealt with in one committee, but in a silo-breaking approach by all committees involved, and we share expertise and knowledge. Other actions of the Disability Rights Coordinator will be a Disability Rights Week, foreseen around the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, the 3rd of December, again with all committees contributing. We will organize a conference with national parliaments on the access for persons with disabilities to the European election in June 2024, together with the Gender Equality Committee. We will also organize a hearing on the rights of women and girls with disabilities. My colleagues in the Petition Committee will organize a workshop, and so on. Every event is web streamed. You can all attend. The Disability Rights Coordinator will also be able to attend meeting of the Parliamentary Bureau High-Level Group on Gender Equality and Diversity. The Bureau is the highest governing body in the House to decide upon the accessibility and inclusiveness as employee, as I highlighted in the way we are connecting political and administrative branch to really gather expertise and mainstream our strategies. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, I conclude my speech in saying that our aim to ensure these innovative structures in the European Parliament is to assure that we as politicians do not only decide upon what EU member states should do to advance the rights of persons with disabilities, but the European Parliament leads by example. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathrin Langensieben. 5 members out of 705. 20%, which is roughly the number of persons with disabilities in any society, would mean 141 members in the European Parliament. And that means we're currently about at 3% of where we ought to be. So this is the current state of affairs. And that's why it's important what we're doing here to increase this number to 141. Not pat at the next elections, but probably later on. Now, you've mentioned, and this is important, that implementing the CRPD and realizing the rights of persons with disabilities also requires a change in the organizational structures in which politics is being conducted. You mentioned networks. You mentioned the term silo breaking. We need to seriously rethink how we come to decisions in democratic institutions and how those structures, the processes, organizations need to be changed in order for the rights of persons with disabilities to be fully estimated and realized. This is the main gist that I take from your intervention. Thank you. And we will go on with our next speaker, Francisco Undaraga.
Muchas gracias. Les ofrezco mis disculpas. No hablo correctamente inglés, así que me van a traducir. Para mí es un honor estar aquí en una triple condición. La primera y, por cierto, la más importante, como discapacitado. Nací sin 2 piernas y sin un brazo, producto de un accidente automovilístico que tuvo mi madre. La segunda, y por cierto, un gran honor, ser actualmente parlamentario de mi país y haber sido vicepresidente de la Cámara de Diputados de Chile durante la legislatura anterior.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but I'm going to speak Spanish. I am here as a disabled person. I miss 2 legs and I have problems with my arms. I'm also here as a member of Parliament and also as Vice President of the former Senate in Chile.
Por ello, inicio mi intervención destacando la importancia estratégica de incrementar la comprensión de los asuntos relativos a la discapacidad y movilizar el apoyo a la dignidad y los derechos y el bienestar de las personas discapacitadas como uno de los objetivos prioritarios para el desarrollo de Chile, Latinoamérica y el mundo. Latinoamérica tiene más de 80 millones de personas discapacitadas. Chile tiene cerca de 2.700.000 personas discapacitadas. Y bueno, ustedes saben mejor que nada en cómo es la relación en el resto del mundo.
I think that our main task ahead of us is to bring more awareness and also to bring dignity to people with disabilities, both for Chile, for Latin America, and for the whole world. In Latin America, there are around 800 million people with a disability, and in Chile, we have around 2,700,000 people.
Me permito compartir con ustedes algunos datos relevantes que nos entrega un estudio que acaba de realizar quien me acompaña hoy día acá con nosotros, que es el director del Servicio Nacional de Discapacidad, don Daniel Concha, que señala que existe un mayor porcentaje en Chile de mujeres con discapacidad respecto a hombres. El 22% son mujeres del total y el 19% son hombres. El porcentaje de personas con discapacidad es aún mayor según aumenta la edad. En el tramo de 60 años y más se ubica casi el 33% de las personas con discapacidad en Chile. Please.
I would like to quote some data from the report of the National Authority for People with Disabilities, who's also here. I would like to underline the gender perspective of disabilities. There are more women with a disability than men, and also age seems to play a role, a very important role. Among the section of people with 60 years and more, we have 33% of all people with disability in Chile.
Estos datos muestran la importancia que el Estado promueva con fuerza políticas de inclusión, pues la prevalencia de la discapacidad afecta en mayor medida a las personas más vulnerables, más a las mujeres que a los hombres, más a los mayores que a los jóvenes, y aún más a los pobres que a los ricos.
I think this only goes to show how important it is for states to foster and push through legislation on inclusion, because disabilities happen to affect more vulnerable people. They affect women more than they affect men, and they affect more the elderly than the young. And also, very importantly, they particularly affect poor people.
Una sociedad más libre, más justa y más inclusiva requiere que haya la mayor igualdad de oportunidades posibles para toda la ciudadanía, y claramente en Chile las personas con discapacidad tenemos todavía lamentablemente menos oportunidades. Además, es importante considerar que el objetivo no es que la persona con discapacidad sean dependientes de la ayuda del Estado. El objetivo es que las personas con discapacidad podamos ser lo más libres y autónomas posible.
I think it's evident that if we want a free society, a fair society, and an inclusive society, then we need to have equal opportunities for all, including people with a disability. And it's evident that right now, and that is not the case in Chile. Our goal shouldn't be for people with a disability to claim state benefits. Our goal should be for people with disability to be as free as possible and as autonomous as possible.
El Estado debe fomentar la inclusión educacional y laboral, facilitando los cuidados, apoyando los tratamientos médicos que requieran, pero esto con el objetivo de su inserción en todos los ámbitos de la vida social y en coordinación con los sectores privados y las iniciativas de la sociedad civil.
The state must strive for the inclusion of people with disability in the labour market, and people with disability should be able to access care and health services. But the main goal should always be for people with a disability to be fully included in our social life in general, in employment, in everything, in the social life and also in the labour market.
No cabe duda que estos antecedentes traen consigo importantes desafíos para el tercer mundo y especialmente para Chile. Pero sin embargo tengo que reconocer que en Chile cuenta con una institucionalidad pública en esta materia. El Servicio Nacional de Discapacidad ha trabajado desde el año 2010 en la generación de oportunidades para las personas con discapacidad, promoviendo su participación social y el pleno ejercicio de sus derechos. No puedo dejar de afirmar que hemos avanzado respecto de ajustar nuestro marco jurídico.
It is obvious that, considering that our starting point is difficult, well, there will be big challenges for the developing world and for Chile in particular. But we must also be aware of the fact that in Chile we already have a public institution on the rights of people with a disability. And they have been working since 2010 to foster participation in society of people with a disability, and also so that people with a disability can fully enjoy their rights. I think we have made progress, particularly as far as the legal situation is concerned.
El Parlamento que yo represento hoy día tiene y cuenta con una comisión de personas con discapacidad que revisa las materias legales en relación al tema. Contamos con una norma que es la ley 20.422, que establece las normas sobre igualdad de oportunidades e inclusión laboral y social en el mundo de la discapacidad en Chile.
In my parliament, we have a committee on people with disabilities, which goes through all legal matters pertaining to people with disabilities. We have a law called Law 2422 on equal opportunities for people with a disability, equal opportunities for the labour market and for labour inclusion and for social inclusion in general.
Personalmente he contribuido al mejoramiento de estas leyes, con modificaciones a la manera que definimos algunas discapacidades. En Chile no estaba reconocida la sordoceguera, no era una discapacidad. Hicimos una ley de mi autoría para reconocerla como discapacidad única.
I have personally contributed to the improvement of certain laws regarding disabilities and how they are defined. For example, in Chile, we didn't have a definition of deaf and blindness. It was just not in any law. And I personally drafted a law to cover that kind of people who are deaf and blind.
Además, avanzamos en la inclusión laboral que sea más efectiva, y no solo para cumplir con una cuota dentro de una empresa. Y personalmente generé una ley para generar inclusión y dar sanciones al incumplimiento de las mismas, que actualmente ya está vigente.
I think that we have also achieved progress in the labour market, and we have pushed for the inclusion of people with disabilities in the labour market. But that shouldn't be just a box-ticking exercises for companies so that they comply with certain quotas. So we have a new law on inclusion, which includes sanctions for companies that do not respect the principle of inclusion in the labor market.
Para finalizar, la inclusión real no puede caer en el error de generalizar a todas las discapacidades como una misma discapacidad o como un mismo problema. Hay múltiples discapacidades y las necesidades de cada una pueden ser profundamente distintas a la de una persona en silla de ruedas, con una discapacidad como la mía, que yo camino en prótesis, o una discapacidad cognitiva, o una discapacidad de sordo-ceguera. La inclusión real debe ser capaz de trabajar con estas diferencias y de incluir de la forma más plena posible a estas personas, no solamente en el mundo laboral, sino también en el mundo académico, en el mundo del emprendimiento, en la política democrática, en los parlamentos y en todos los ámbitos relevantes de la sociedad. Vengo del confín del mundo a darle las gracias por haberme invitado, por conocerlos. Creo importante que la inclusión en el mundo de la discapacidad no solamente sea con nosotros, sino que sea, como dice un gran pensador chileno, aceptando al otro como un legítimo otro. Muchas gracias.
So, a real inclusion of people with a disability requires of a targeted approach. We cannot generalize and say that all disabilities are the same, because they're not, and the needs are not. It is different if you use a wheelchair or if you walk with a prosthesis, as I do. Cognitive disability is very different to a blind and deaf disability, for example. So if we want a true inclusiveness, then we must bear all these differences into account. In order to include people with a disability not only in the labour market but also in the academic world, in the entrepreneurial world, in parliaments and in society at large. I come from almost the end of the world, and I would like to thank you all very much for listening, and I would like to end by saying, as a Chilean thinker says, that inclusion doesn't happen only when they take people like us into account, but it only happens when you accept the other as a legitimate other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Unduraga. Out of your very wide-ranging presentation, I would like to point out the central aspect with which you began, to respect and guarantee the dignity of persons with disabilities, just as we respect and guarantee the dignity of everybody. This is the basic idea we've had since Enlightenment. The purpose of our countries is to guarantee the dignity of each of our citizens, as the German Constitution very famously declares. So this is what we strive to with persons with disabilities, just as we have with everybody else for the last 200 years. It's about time that we start here as well. Thank you. So, we have listened to a wide range of different inputs, of different thoughts about democracy and disability and how to merge the two. It is now time to open up the floor to your comments, to your questions, to your suggestions. I have been informed that we could go a little longer than anticipated. If you agree, of course, there's no, you don't have to stay, but if you want to, you're certainly invited to stay until 1440 at maximum, it says here. So, the floor is yours. I don't know your name.
Kenny, Member of the Parliament in Ireland, and thank you very much for the great presentations. And I would like to acknowledge Dragos, who acknowledged myself, and Michael Moynihan, who's a colleague of mine. We both serve on the Oireachtas Committee on Disability Matters in our Parliament. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Pat Clark and his kind words about us. I think you yourself, Marcus, actually attended one of our meetings of the committees. And I suppose just to say that our committee was set up, it was the first committee that was set up in the new Parliament to actually deal with and probably give visibility to disability matters. We do that through bringing into the committee people who are living the experience so that we can be better informed. We're also set up primarily to monitor the progress Ireland is making in implementing the CRPD. It has proven to be a very constructive committee. We have achieved some progress. Not least that we published a report on the Article 29, participating in public life for people with disabilities last November. We have also, at this stage, in the process of making our Parliament an autism-friendly Parliament, and training is ongoing at the moment for members and for staff. And I suppose the last thing I would say is that when, Catherine, you talk about the participation of people in public life who have disabilities, we have, I think, one public representative in our Parliament who has a disability. So shame on us as well. And I do believe that we need to encourage, not alone encourage, but also we need to maybe positively discriminate in our nominations from our political institutions, that we have a better quota of people who go for election so that we can actually try and increase the participation. I think it's vital. One of my very good friends is an amputee who serves in Galway County Council, and he's the only person with a disability on that particular out of 39 people. So I think the figures speak for themselves, but I think a forum like this gives us a great opportunity globally to actually talk about this, and not alone talk about it, but make the changes that we all know need to be made. And thank you again for your kindness. Thank you.
Thank you. So I vividly remember my participation in a committee of your Parliament. It was on the optional protocol, the individual complaints procedure, on which, by the way, at 4:45 there will be a side event here in this building. It is important that we also look at the CRPD as law. And I was thinking, how can it be permissible that political parties do not put up persons with disabilities as candidates? Can we do something against this in courts? And if yes, how? And if not, why not? Okay, so next person here.
I came from Poland. I am a member of European Parliament, and I am disabled since childhood. And I received a proposition to candidate to European Parliament. In this moment, I had also cancer, but I was presented not because of my disability and sickness. I was presented because of my activity in my life. I created an NGO, Polish NGO, who is working in different countries attained by the war. So I was in Iraq, in Afghanistan, a lot of countries where there was the war. So I am very known in Poland. And my aim is to involve Poland to the international activity in humanitarian field, because Poland is not very active as a state. And so I wanted to show that it is possible. And I was elected I had the fourth result in Poland. So, and if someone proposed me that I can be a candidate because I am disabled, I will not accept it. And also, I would like to say that as Polish Humanitarian Action, we organized a parliament of children, which was in the real parliament, in the building of Polish parliament. And it was a big event, and sometimes people call me and they ask me, why you not invite the disabled people or the other groups, the scouts, or and I say no, because we ask the children to write an appeal to finish the war in former Yugoslavia, and we choose the better works. And so in this way, 460 persons was in the parliament. And, you know, there was one girl, she wrote a beautiful letter. She was blind. And there was people with disability, but we choose them because of the very good work they did. So this is my experience, and I wanted to share it with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a very, I think, a very important remark. I don't think today people get elected to parliament because they have a disability. It's rather the other way round. Persons with disabilities have to distinguish themselves much more than everybody else simply to get on the party list and to get elected. I think this is the situation we have today. We go to the lady over there. The floor is yours.
Français, si c'est possible.
Vous pouvez parler en français, mais je ne sais pas si ça va ici.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Ici, je suis Essambo Irène. Je suis ministre en charge des personnes avec handicap de la République démocratique du Congo. Je voudrais intervenir ici et féliciter l'Union européenne pour cette thématique sur l'inclusion des personnes avec handicap et la démocratie. Je sais que l'Union européenne intervient beaucoup dans le cadre de la coopération internationale pour pousser à la promotion du genre, mais trop peu d'intervention en ce qui concerne la promotion des personnes avec handicap, surtout pour leur représentation dans les assemblées nationales, provinciales et locales. Je voudrais solliciter, je plaide au fait que de la même manière que l'Union européenne est en train de pousser sur la promotion du genre au niveau de la coopération internationale avec les États, que les mêmes efforts soient aussi orientés pour la représentativité des personnes avec handicap. Moi, je suis en train d'expérimenter pour la toute première fois l'existence d'un ministère sur les personnes avec handicap. Et avec l'approche basée sur le droit, c'est un grand défi, mais heureusement, j'ai l'appui du président de la République. Mais il y a beaucoup de défis à relever et j'ai besoin qu'il y ait vraiment un appui dans le cadre de la coopération de l'Union européenne pour pousser les pays, surtout nous qui commençons avec ce genre d'activités, à ce que cela puisse être une réalité, parce que nous avons beaucoup de personnes avec handicap qui demandent d'être représentées et que leurs conditions de vie soient améliorées. Merci.
Thank you, Madame la Ministre. International cooperation needs to include persons with disabilities and needs to extend to political processes. I've had as you rightly mentioned, I had the privilege of reviewing legislation from the Democratic Republic of the Congo a few years ago. Your new law that you put in place at that time, I had a chance to look at it, so I congratulate it for that. We go to there's there's a gentleman over there, but there's also a gentleman over there. The floor is yours. There's a button that can be pushed.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Hamza Adam, a member of Parliament of Ghana. Let me say it's refreshing listening to the panelists. It's been exciting. The discussions going on, the lamentations are not different from what we experience. Let me mention that it is sad to know that out of 275 parliamentarians, we have none being a disabled person. And so we have a lot to do. And just like the chair was saying, we before you become a member of parliament, it's a very competitive process. And there's no room for disabled people to be able to take advantage based on their situation. Everybody is on the same level ground to compete for the position. So I think it's one of the challenges that we are facing. We need to look at it. It comes with a lot of resources. It comes with a lot of endurance. I mean, and you can imagine some of the challenges that are faced by some disabled people. I also want to ask, so conscious effort has to be made. I was also enthused by the last presenter. He indicated that they have committee on disabilities in their parliament. I think, for me, I mean, it's a good move that I think we could introduce in Ghana, and it will be helpful. So if I want to find out how did you go about it? I mean, did you have some challenges trying to establish a committee? Because I would love to have a committee in Ghana focusing on disability issues. So I think, thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you, sir. I will give the floor quickly to Dragos. He will provide a comment on your intervention.
Yeah, so I would really like to greet you. I was not sure how many other members of the parliament will be in the room, so thank you very much for your participation. Are there any other members of parliaments in the room? Okay, so we have another one here. So this is remarkable. And I just wanted to react to what you said. The whole purpose of this particular side event is to talk about the issues related to parliamentary representation, to the way in which parliaments can become in championing the agenda of persons with disability, and to cooperate at the parliamentary dimension on this particular issue. And it's actually crucial to know that Ireland has a similar thing, Spain has a similar thing, Greece has a similar thing. We've learned from Uruguay that they have a similar thing. So we have these good practices, and we would like to expand them in Europe and beyond. So thank you very much for that, and I wish that we can stay in touch for sharing these best practices. Thank you.
With this, we go to our next speaker, the gentleman over there.
So my question is around, I'm from Justin Hill, Children and Young People with Disabilities Australia. My question is around underrepresentation. So in Australia, we are the same. We have one person with a disability, which is very, that shows a lot of lack of underrepresentation. So my question is, how do we get more people with disabilities into political parties first?
So that's a very straightforward question, as you would expect from people from Australia. Does anybody on the panel have, how do we get more people with disabilities into parliaments, and how do we get young persons with disabilities to be represented in parliaments? Anybody, any idea? Kathleen Langensiepen?
Yeah, maybe I can make a start, and that we have voted, my dear colleagues here in the European, not here in the European Parliament, in the other European Parliament, on the right to vote for young people. So in the European Union, people from 16, they are allowed now to vote. So that is the first step, I think. If I have the right by law to take part on the election, that's one step. Same with persons with disabilities. Even Germany was such a big enemy for persons, or they had the opinion that persons under law protection are not able to vote. Was against the UNCRPD. The highest court in Germany cancelled that. The European Parliament voted on that persons with disabilities have the right to vote. Member states must adopt it. Of course, we have NGOs, parties, and we have no law that parties are obliged to say, now we have a quota on queer people, on young people, on persons with disabilities. Here and there, it's a problem with our law in Germany of equality, so it's not always that easy. Same with 50% of women must join a parliament. Even that is the law of parité problematic. Role models is one point. We need role models, and we have to, what I said in another side event, persons with disabilities, we must be more solidar, empowerment, and make it more visible. And that we are, as a team from all over the world. India has national elections next year, European Parliament, next elections are next year. Even the US have elections next year. So now this year is the opportunity for political parties, for institutions to push young people, queer people, more women, persons with disabilities on the list, and that we have more diverse parliaments in the next year in the parliamentary areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Langensiep. Now, 1440 at maximum means one more question. The floor is yours. Yes.
Thank you so much for this very interesting conversation, and I will call it a conversation because it is among friends and allies. I was struck by your question, actually, Marcus. Why can't we force political parties to do more? And it goes to the heart of the matter, because political parties are the upholders of political processes and life. And if you do not do anything about the political parties, as in organizational processes, but also their statutes and their internal laws, if they are not being inclusive, then it is a problem. And I will repeat what I said yesterday. No one is born a president, nor a minister, nor a member of parliament. We all get training, we all get experience, and we all get the chance to prove ourselves. But that provement of ourselves is much harder for persons with disability, but to anyone who deviates from the norm. And that's why I still believe that both the global but also the European community of persons with disability will need to push the political parties and ask for answers, name and shame, mobilize and organize around the political parties, and actually call them out on the, excuse me for saying this, on their bullshit when they say that they are working for equality, when in reality they are not. They are just reaffirming the normative hegemony that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you. So it goes to all the politicians in the room, because they're all members of a political party. Start changing it within your own parties, and then we're going to get ahead faster. Now, I will briefly give the floor to Dragos for some recognition.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to not to end this event without thanking you again for your participation. Thank again His Excellency, the Ambassador of Greece, for allowing this to be possible. But also, I would like to have a special thanks to the EU delegation at the UN, and especially with Alexander Stutzman, Clement Zimmer, and Klina Paskevichute. I mean, that was a really amazing team effort, and I would like to thank you very much for that. With this, again, I'm really delighted that we had that. And as said before, let's try to do that and to have a continuation of this particular agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last word belongs to His Excellency, Mr. Sekkeres.
No, very briefly, I would also like to thank all of you, and especially the European Parliament, for allowing us to co-participate and to be part of this very important event, all the panelists, all the elected officials, members of Parliament. And last but not least, allow me also to recognize the presence of three permanent representatives in this room. The permanent representative of Chile is here, Mrs. Paula Narves Ollada. The permanent representative of Georgia, Mr. David Bakraj, is here. And the permanent representative of Romania was here, Cornel Feruta. So I would like to thank my colleagues and all other colleagues and all of you who came and joined us in this very important historic event. And I would say this will be the start of a cooperation of the European Parliament, not only with the Greek mission, of course, with all other missions, but we're very happy to participate again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.